those heads, there was water in those historically. If the water is still present, we're planning to sample that water. We'll begin an effort shortly. But those are our next steps. That is what we're focused on. And I think Mr. Rutherford mentioned toward the end, we'll be able to entertain questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Our next speaker is Chris Bush, and following her will be Will Knowlton, and both of them are going to address some public health considerations.
Thank you, Jim. As he said, I'm Chris Bush. I'm with the State Health Department in Lansing, Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. And there are several people with me today who can assist, and you probably already had the chance to talk with them during the public availability session. But we have been working on PFAS issues in the state since 2012, when the contamination was first found in the state by the DEQ sampling that was done up at the former Wurtsmith Air Force Base in Oscoda. So since that time, we have become involved at several other sites, including up to now Parchment. And the actions at our sites, at the sites that are in the state, have been proactive. This is not just about a number. This is not just about 70 parts per trillion, but we want to understand why your location is important and the location of where that source could be. That's some of the work that DEQ is doing to find out where the PFAS and Parchment came from and what we're going to be doing about that. Our actions are also immediate when we see that there is a need to stop exposures that could be potentially harmful. We have worked with the local health departments in various areas, including here in Kalamazoo County, to provide bottled water and then also filters when we think that it's necessary to have these there as an interim measure while DEQ conducts the investigation and we determine what the long-term solution is going to be to fix this situation. And we act to be protective of public health. We, as I said, we don't just look at the 70 part per trillion, that's for PFOS and PFOA combined, but we look at the group of these chemicals that are analyzed for in these drinking water samples to get a feel for what it is telling us. So I wanted to start with that slide and then move into the next slide as far as what are the health effects that can be associated with exposure to these two chemicals for which there is a lot of information and which EPA felt confident about setting its lifetime health advisory. We'll talk a little bit about the lifetime health advisory in just a second. So some of the information that we have about these two chemicals and what health outcomes could happen come from studies in people where there have been cities or populations that have been exposed to this through their drinking water. And one of those major groups of people that was studied, an epidemiological study, was called the C8 study. And I'm guessing that some of you in the audience tonight have done your homework and started looking for information about these chemicals. So maybe you've read about this already. The C8 study occurred in a population, West Virginia and Ohio. The Ohio River divides those communities, and there was a DuPont, or there still is a DuPont facility along the river that ended up releasing these chemicals, primarily PFOA, to the river. And these communities obtained their drinking water from the river. So this was a long, drawn-out issue. It's still going on, I'm sure, for these people as far as trying to determine what this means to them in the long run. They are off that water, thankfully. However, part of the resolution for the work done at this site was that there was a very scientifically conducted study of the health effects that people were experiencing and seeing if there was a connection to them drinking this water. So this list that's on the left side of the slide indicates some of the findings that were found. This was a group of 65,000 some individuals that were studied, got a lot of information from them, and then there were other human studies too, so this corroborated in some of this. But I'm going to read off some of those, some of the lists that we have up here. Higher cholesterol seems to be linked to exposure to these chemicals. Thyroid disease, ulcerative colitis, some people might call that irritable bowel syndrome. Testicular and kidney cancers have been associated with it. Changes to the immune system and high blood pressure during pregnancy, preeclampsia. So this was with the C8 study, the average concentration that these people were exposed to was 3,500 parts per trillion. So that is higher than what we have seen in the drinking water at Parchment. Just trying to let you know that that was their number. Now we also use animal studies to help us learn more about this, because we don't conduct studies on people. We use laboratory animals under controlled conditions. We know what the doses that they are getting, and we look very carefully for what kind of effects might show up in these animals that could be related to humans. So the animal studies have shown that exposure during pregnancy could sometimes alter what happened to the pups. So these are rodent studies, rats and mice. What happened to the pups as far as their paw development or their birth weight. And for some, it caused early puberty in some of the male pups. But we've also seen, like it was seen in some of the human studies, the immune system changes, and then changes in liver and kidney weight. So that gave us some information and gave EPA some information to develop their lifetime health advisory level, 70 part per trillion. So the next slide, please. This is a lifetime health advisory. So if you were to go and have a drink of water that you didn't realize had PFAS in it at whatever level, it's not something that you would expect to get sick from right away. This is something that over the course of a lifetime that we would be concerned about for elevated exposures. The Lifetime Health Advisory looks specifically at PFOA and PFOS. And I think Mark described that this family of compounds, the PFAS, has a lot of different chemicals in it. These two, PFOA and PFOS, are ones that we know a lot of information about. There's a lot of studies on them in the lab and in people who, in populations that have had this in their drinking water. So they felt confident, EPA did, when they developed this Lifetime Health Advisory. And I'll go through just a little bit of detail on that in the next slide. So it's 70 part per trillion, which is the same as nanograms per liter. For those of you who have had your well sampled or you're going to get it sampled, when you get your results back, it will be, the units that they show will be this NG/L that you see on the slide. That's nanograms per liter. That's the same thing as parts per trillion when you're talking about a water concentration. This concentration was derived to be protective in the short term. Even though we're talking about a lifetime, we're also thinking about the fetus. So that is a short-term exposure, even though it's the lifetime of the fetus. It's 9 months in the womb. But also long-term or lifetime health exposures for children and adults. So it's meant to be protective of an unborn baby for developmental effects, and those were the changes that were noted in the animals, the changes in the paw and the body weight, and some other changes that have been noted, and should be protecting all people against cancer and non-cancer effects. So let's talk a little bit more about the development of these. And this slide and the next slide are very similar. So I will go through this slide a little more carefully, the next slide a little more quickly. So on the left of the slide, it talks about the lowest dose in an animal study that was able to cause an effect in the animal. Sometimes they find a dose that does not cause an effect, and that's helpful information to know too. So from there, that can be a very high amount that's in an animal. That's often the case with laboratory studies. From there, the scientists developed what they felt was the appropriate human dose at that same level. So at this level in a rat or in a mouse in the lab, what does that equate to in a human dose? So that is where that second green bar comes into play. Now, with lab studies in animals, the animals are very much the same from animal to animal as far as their genetic makeup. But we look around the room tonight and we are all very different from each other. So this next step in developing what a lifetime health advisory is consider that there could be sensitive populations in the humans, so that we want to protect for what the most sensitive is. And if we're protecting for the most sensitive, then we are protecting for all. So in this case, we are protecting for the fetus, and that brought it down to what's you see at the bottom of that third column-ish. It says 350 ppt part per trillion. The next step that was taken was in consideration that because these chemicals are so frequently used for everyday products that we use, that industry use, commercial enterprises use too, is that we can have exposure to other items that have these chemicals in it. That is the nature of our society. We are an industrial society, so chemicals are in our environment, and we have small amounts of everyday exposure to them. It's when we get into situations when there is a large source of exposure, like what we saw in the Parchment system, that we have to think about what that means. But on an everyday exposure level, about 20% is attributed, about 1/5 of it is attributed to water. So if we divide that 350 by 5, because it's 1/5, we come down to 70 parts per trillion. So what this slide is showing is that there is a great decrease from the effects seen in a laboratory study brought down to where an acceptable amount in the water is that would not be expected to cause harm to people. Now I'm going to have you go quickly to the next slide. It's very similar. Doses are slightly different at the beginning because the first slide was PFOA. This one was talking about PFOS, but the steps are essentially the same, going from an animal concentration down to what that would be in a human, protecting for the most sensitive, and then figuring out what's called your relative source contribution, or that 1/5 amount. So coming down with a very protective number. Next slide, please. Before I let you go and get on to Dr. Nettleton's talk, I just want to let you know that the toxicologist who's going to be working on this site is not me, but she will be working with the community from here on out. Her name is Jordan Bailey. The best way to get a hold of us is to call our 800 number, because you may have questions for the toxicologist, or maybe you want to talk about fishing in the area, or hunting in the area, or whatever, and we can direct those calls to the best staff to give you an answer for that. And sometimes that might not be in our department, it might be the Department of Agriculture. It might be the DNR that you want to talk to. So I mentioned fishing information. We've got our michigan.gov/eatsafefish. There's information there, and as we get fish sampled, more and more fish sampled throughout the state for PFOS, which is the one that's of concern in fish. We get that information onto the website and into our Eat Safe Fish guides. And then I want to put in a plug for the michigan.gov/PFAS response site. That is where the Michigan PFAS Action Response Team, or NPART, keeps updating. So slides from tonight's meeting will be there. Information about public water supplies that get tested throughout the state is going to be posted there. You'll learn about other sites, not just your own there. So thank you for your time. Thank you for listening to some boring toxicology talk, but I will definitely be happy to answer your questions during the Q&A time. I'm going to turn it over to local health.
Good evening. My name is Dr. William Nettleton. I'm an assistant professor in family and community medicine at Western Michigan University Homer Stryker MD School of Medicine. I also serve as medical director for Kalamazoo County Health and Community Services. I don't have slides to share with you this evening. Rather, I hope to discuss and describe, one, the role of local health authority, and two, to provide further context for the information we're receiving today. So first and foremost, the role of Kalamazoo County Health and Community Services is to protect the public's health. Second, we act as a liaison between our state partners, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, and our local municipalities to you, the public, our community. Third, we interpret and we communicate potential health hazards that may present to our community. And last, we provide assessment and intervention for those potential health hazards, such as PFAS, in our community. I think it'd be helpful to describe the worldview of a scientist, of an epidemiologist for our discussion this evening. And in a nutshell, we seek to understand the relationship between exposure to a chemical like PFAS and an outcome or a disease or a health-related event. That is really complicated. There are many factors that go into that relationship. To better understand that relationship, scientists perform studies in both animals and in humans that ask different questions. All of that information goes into an overall risk assessment that's presented at the federal level, reviewed at the state level, and then implemented on a local level in our community. And as you've heard this evening, the science surrounding PFAS is emerging, it's evolving, and therefore our recommendations and our interventions will be changing as well. And I think it's important to acknowledge the uncertainty surrounding PFAS, as often it is the case with other potential health hazards that present to the community. For example, the fact that an exposure may have occurred to a chemical like PFAS does not necessarily mean that a disease associated with PFAS has occurred or will ever occur. And that statement I just said is really unnerving. It's really frustrating to hear. And we at Health and Community Services are here to walk with you through this entire process, and we commit to providing further assessment and intervention for this potential health hazard in our community. Thus far, we at the local health department and the state health department have communicated to our local physicians. Your community doctors have received information regarding potential health effects of PFAS in our community. I will be available to provide answers and further descriptions to your questions that you may have on other specific health-related facts or concerns in our question and answer portion of tonight's program.
Dr. Nettleton. Our next speaker is James Baker, and Mr. Baker is going to provide an update regarding the city of Kalamazoo's water system. James?
Thank you everybody for coming out tonight. What we want to focus on discussion, explaining our response, the immediate response, and then the plan as we work through to flush the system out. As soon as we got a call about 6:30 p.m. to the city and said we have a problem with Parchment. We immediately deployed a response plan. We had over 50 personnel in public services and public safety mobilized immediately and got on site. Within 6 hours, at 12:32 a.m. Thursday morning, we had fresh City Kalamazoo water flowing into Parchment. With that, we also protected the City Kalamazoo water. We protected that against backflow from Parchment. All those protections were put in place to ensure the two water systems would be protected. We wanted to explain why it was so important for us to get here fast and get a water system going. When you have high densities within a populated area, you need a tremendous amount of water for fire protection. You had that fire protection within 6 hours. You also have sanitary needs. We wanted to make sure we could ensure the best quality of life for everybody as they work through this. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is a photo of just one of our connection points. And a lot of the work that went into getting that water system connected over on a temporary basis. A temporary basis includes the use of fire apparatus. We started with 3 fire apparatus the first night. As we worked through and increased some of the connections, we installed some larger hoses. We keep working on getting closer and closer and closer to a more permanent solution. We now are relying on only 1 fire apparatus. Next slide, please. Again, you can see the backflow preventers on the Kalamazoo hydrant. Next slide, please. So as we talk about moving towards a clean system, we had to get all of the Parchment water out. We met with the DEQ, the Drinking Water Division, and detailed out a plan involving turning the valves in Parchment, isolating the tower, draining the tower into the sanitary sewer, opening the valves back up, pumping new water in, and repeating that process. Once we had clean water in the tower, we then worked through a systematic process to start in the middle and work our way out, pushing all the Parchment water out. We then worked with the Water Resources Division of the MDQ to see how we could best capture and treat that water and prevent it as best we could from going into the storm sewer systems. We created a storm sewer to sanitary sewer bypass plan, and we implemented that, and we were able to catch a majority of the water that was discharged during flushing operations. I will tell you that we did not catch all of it. Water from flushing operations did enter the storm sewers. We are aware of that. We also have engineering protection devices in place, pop-off valves, which protect the structural integrity of the existing Parchment water tower. We're not operating with the Parchment system right now. We know their wells are shut off. We're now operating in your system with fire apparatuses, pressure gauges, turning the valves, and dedicated City Kalamazoo staff keeping the entire system in order. In order to ensure that we don't put too much pressure on the water tower, we have pop-off devices which at a certain pressure will open up and allow water out of the system. With the system completely exchanged with water and completely flushed out, we were ready to start PFAS testing in Monday morning. So in terms of timeline, within 72 hours of getting the initial call, City Kalamazoo staff, or with City Parchment staff, turned the system completely over, and we're ready for PFAS testing. In addition to this, we're doing a full range of chemistry testing, water quality testing, and in cooperation with the DEQ Water Quality Division. Our lab is out every day grabbing ran samples to ensure the chemistry between the two water systems is correct. The chemicals that we're putting in the water, such as chlorine to keep everybody protected, is correct, and that we're moving in the right direction. We expect PFAS test results from the city council water in the Parchment pipes as early as late Friday evening. Next slide, please. As we work through this system, we want to make sure that we're always moving forward and always getting ready to turn over a water system as soon as we're told we can do so. You see crews up now, right now, up on G Avenue. That construction started this morning. We were issued a Part 399 construction permit through the MDEQ, and we worked with our engineers, with the MDEQ engineers, to design a system that enables Parchment to have a choice moving forward with their decisions regarding the water. Once that system's in place, the further and further we get with construction, we have less and less and less dependency on fire apparatus. It is our goal to get that fire truck out of here as soon as possible and return slowly to a more normal life as soon as we can. Next slide, please. So as we look at next steps, we're now ready for homeowners and business owners to begin service line flushing. If you came over and visited us at our table, we had a 3-page information packet for you. As we stated, we flushed the mains. Those mains have been clear since Monday, and we're now ready for you folks to flush out your private residences, business, and everything else. A copy of this flushing procedures and instructions will be available to you. We plan to mail it to you. We plan to post it on the website, and we plan to be present in the community to hand it out. With that, I'll turn it back over to Jim. Thank you.
Thank you, James. And our final speaker on the panel is Brian Ergain. And Brian's going to give us an update relative to the water distribution that continues.
Good evening, folks. My team was tasked with organizing and establishing a water distribution point throughout the emergency crisis. Simply, what we're going to do is make sure that the people in the community who were affected by this had safe drinking water, and we supplied that drinking water in an effective and efficient manner. Our people really knew right from the beginning, our job was simple, and it was to make sure that you got your water as quickly as possible. To explain that to you a little bit more, I want to tell you about where we came from. Next slide, please. So as Mr. Baker already said, we convened in the Emergency Operations Center at 7 p.m. Everybody was moving very fast to try to come up with the best solution possible, and we divided out into teams. At 7:30 p.m., just shortly thereafter, Senator O'Brien was able to find 4 semi-trailers bottled of water in the city of Battle Creek. A few minutes later, we contacted Parchment Public Schools. We identified that location as being probably the best location for the distribution center for a couple of reasons. First, it's central location in the community, which is well known. Second, it has a simple entrance and egress off G Avenue and Orient, and allowed for a simple flow of traffic. And then finally, the relationship that we had with the school from some previous events that we've had with them. Next slide. Sheriff Fuller, right after that, was able to find transport for that water from Battle Creek to Kalamazoo. 2 township officers were immediately dispatched to the school, where they secured both the entrance and the exit and the grounds of the school. We have maintained 24-hour security of that site since then. We will continue to do so. Next slide, please. At about 12:30 a.m., the two of the first trucks arrived with the water. 10,000 cases of water total in the 4 semis provided. At 2:30, officers from Kalamazoo Township set up cones and barricades to make that, if you've been through that system, a little bit more efficient and ready to go for the morning. At at 6 a.m., first volunteers arrived and started unloading those semi-trailers by hand. Then at 6:30, we got our first people coming in from the community, and we started distributing water. So if I could take a moment just to tell you what an amazing response that is. In under 12 hours of being notified, we were able to get water on site and have it being distributed to the community. It was an amazing effort. Next slide, please. What happened at 8 a.m. was probably the most remarkable thing that I've seen in a long time. The servant leaders. Yeah. The servant leaders from your community, your kids, unloaded 3 full semi-trailers by hand and put them out for distribution. Coach Hinton was absolutely amazing that day. Parchment Public Schools has been amazing. They've been an amazing host, and they've done so many things for us. If I could acknowledge your new superintendent, Jason Meisner, is in the back. I know Jason's been on the job for about 5 days, so thank you. He's always been a remarkable person, and he's going to do great things for you. Judging by the responses that we've received from the communities you're driving through and all the help that you're providing for your neighbors, I can tell you that this community is not a victim in this situation. You guys have shown a resiliency in your community that isn't willing to be victimized and you help yourselves. I've never been more proud to be a part of the community than I have been the last 5 days. You are amazing. Next slide. This has been a collaborative effort. Many people have come together. Michigan State Police has been a tremendous help, as the Kalamazoo County Sheriff's Office, Kalamazoo Department of Public Safety. The Salvation Army has been out every day feeding us. American Red Cross has volunteers, and then the many organizations and sports organizations from across the community that have responded to help out be good neighbors. Next slide, please. Distribution eligibility, this was a little bit difficult thing to get a grasp on. The first day, what we wanted to do was get as much water out as possible. We knew there was going to be some concern. We were very liberal with that, and we pushed out a lot of water that first day. What we know is that the people on the city Parchment water line were definitely eligible, and then we worked really hard with DEQ and county health to identify those folks